I'm Savannah Mitchell, 29, an architect living in Boston. Yesterday, I called my Aunt Patricia about my brother Mason's wedding, supposedly happening today in Atlanta. I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow, I gushed, genuinely excited despite our complicated relationship. There was an awkward pause before she responded. Savannah, it was last week. My stomach dropped as my vision blurred. She continued talking, but her words became distant echoes as reality crashed around me. Before I share how my entire family could exclude me from this milestone, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if family betrayal stories resonate with you. Growing up in suburban Atlanta, the differences between my brother Mason and me were apparent from elementary school. While I gravitated toward books, art, and solitary creative pursuits, Mason embodied the all-American athletic ideal with his natural charisma and football talents. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, never tried to hide their preference for his accomplishments over mine. When I won the state science competition in 8th grade, they nodded politely before rushing off to Mason's football game. When I earned a full scholarship to Cornell for architecture, my father merely commented that it was nice before launching into a 20-minute discussion about Mason's fraternity antics at Georgia Tech. The family dynamic wasn't subtle. Mason was the golden child whose achievements were celebrated with dinner parties and social media announcements, while mine warranted brief acknowledgments at best. Our family photos told the story clearly. Mason front and center beside our beaming parents, while I often stood slightly apart, my smile a bit too forced. Despite this imbalance, I maintained hope that adulthood would equalize our standing in the family. After graduating with honors, I accepted a position at a prestigious Boston architectural firm, believing distance might help reset our relationship dynamics. The geographic separation gave me perspective on patterns I'd normalized, how family gatherings revolved around Mason's schedule, never mine, how my parents called him daily but reached out to me only when they needed something, usually money or professional advice, since my career had flourished. My childhood friend Zoe, who remained in Atlanta, saw the pattern clearly. They treat you like an ATM with a blueprint service, she once remarked after I mentioned sending money for my parents' anniversary party, an event I wasn't actually invited to attend because it just came together last minute. I dismissed her concerns, attributing the oversight to innocent forgetfulness rather than systematic exclusion. The irony didn't escape me that despite being the less favored child, I had become the financial safety net for the family. My Boston-based position at Montgomery Designs had accelerated my career beyond my peers, allowing me to accumulate savings that my brother's more modest insurance sales job couldn't match. When my parents mentioned wanting to renovate their aging colonial home last Christmas, I immediately offered to contribute substantially and provide design expertise for free. They accepted with an enthusiasm I rarely saw directed at me, and for once, I felt genuinely valued. Mason's engagement to Amber Wilson 6 months ago rekindled my hope for family reconnection. When he called to share the news, he actually asked me to help plan aspects of the wedding given my eye for design, the first time he'd ever acknowledged my professional abilities. I threw myself into helping select the venue, a historic garden estate outside Atlanta, and consulted on decorations, even creating digital mock-ups of the space. We had several video calls where Mason and Amber seemed genuinely appreciative, with Amber commenting that my ideas saved the wedding. I committed to flying from Boston to Atlanta for the June 15th ceremony, blocking time off work months in advance and purchasing a non-refundable first-class ticket as a treat to myself. The wedding represented more than my brother's marriage. It symbolized my reintegration into the family fold, a chance to heal old wounds, and establish a more balanced adult relationship with my parents and brother. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. My mother forgot to include me in the bridal shower invitation list. The rehearsal dinner details were never shared despite my repeated requests. My suggestions for the ceremony gradually disappeared from the plans without explanation. But each time, I rationalized their behavior, determined to break the cycle of exclusion through persistent goodwill. The Mitchell family had a long history of forgetting to include me, childhood birthday parties where invitations went out late, forcing me to scramble for friends, high school graduation where they failed to reserve enough seats for my academic mentors, Even my architecture license celebration where they promised to visit but canceled last minute for Mason's flag football tournament. Each incident in isolation seemed like an unfortunate oversight, but Zoe had been pointing out the pattern for years. They don't forget things for Mason, she observed after my parents missed my virtual awards ceremony, but managed to attend his fantasy football draft in person the same weekend. Still, family loyalty ran deep, and I continued making excuses for their behavior while seeking their approval through achievement and generosity. The revelation about the wedding blindsided me completely. I was sitting in my Boston apartment that Thursday evening, suitcase half-packed on my bed, when I decided to call Aunt Patricia to confirm what time she'd pick me up from the Atlanta airport the next day. Patricia had always been marginally kinder to me than my parents, occasionally acknowledging my accomplishments with small gifts or cards. When she answered, her voice carried the overly bright tone people use when uncomfortable. After exchanging pleasantries, I mentioned my excitement about tomorrow's ceremony. The silence that followed stretched painfully before she responded with those devastating words. "Savannah, it was last week." Initially, I thought I had misheard her. "What do you mean?" "Mason's wedding is tomorrow, June 15th. Patricia sighed, then explained in a hesitant voice that the wedding had occurred the previous Saturday, June 8th. According to her, the date had changed months ago due to venue availability issues. My hands began to tremble so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. "That's impossible," I insisted, my voice barely audible. "I've been helping plan everything for June 15th. I have the emails, the calendar invites." Patricia interrupted gently. "Honey, I'm looking at the wedding photos right now. Would you like me to send some?" Without waiting for my response, my phone buzzed with an incoming video call request. I accepted it with numb fingers to find Patricia's face looking concerned before she flipped the camera to show her laptop screen displaying a professional photo album. There they were, unmistakable images of Mason in a classic black tuxedo standing beside Amber in a stunning white gown with the cathedral veil I had helped her select. My parents flanked the couple, my mother in the periwinkle blue dress she described to me, my father sporting the new gray suit he'd mentioned purchasing. The background featured the exact floral arrangements I had suggested, white roses and blue hydrangeas cascading from garden trellises. Every detail I had consulted on was perfectly executed, except I was nowhere to be seen in any image. Patricia scrolled through dozens of photos, the ceremony under the oak arbor, the reception in the glass conservatory, the dance floor where my father twirled a laughing Amber. Photos captured Aunt Patricia herself, Uncle James, my cousins Alexis and Taylor, even distant relatives from California I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was present except me. My voice cracked. They told me it was tomorrow. I have my ticket, my hotel confirmation. Patricia made a sympathetic noise but continued scrolling, stopping at a group photo showing literally every member of the extended Mitchell family posed on the grand staircase of the venue. An entire family united, minus one daughter. My stomach clenched as I recognized faces of relatives who had responded to my texts about seeing them at the wedding just days earlier. My cousin Taylor had asked about my flight details on Tuesday. Uncle James had mentioned looking forward to catching up on Wednesday. None of them had indicated anything was amiss or that the event had already occurred. Did they say why I wasn't there? I managed to ask, my throat constricting around each word. Patricia hesitated before responding. "Your mother told everyone you couldn't make it because of a big project deadline. Some people asked about you, but..." She trailed off awkwardly. A project deadline. The convenient excuse manufactured to explain my absence to confused relatives. The calculated lie that would prevent anyone from questioning further or reaching out to me directly. The professional photos revealed other disturbing details. Personalized table settings with calligraphed name cards for every family member except me. The memory table displaying family photographs where I had been systematically excluded. And most painfully, the wedding program listing the beloved family members in attendance, my name conspicuously absent. As Patricia continued flipping through images, I noticed the wedding hashtag in the corner of one photo. Hashtag Mason and Amber June 8. Pulling up Instagram with trembling fingers, I searched the tag to find hundreds of posts from a week ago, guests celebrating, dancing, sharing candid moments from my brother's wedding. Posts I had never seen because everyone had carefully avoided tagging me. My cousin Alexis, who had texted me about borrowing shoes for the wedding just yesterday, had posted 15 photos with captions about the perfect family celebration. Family friends I'd known since childhood had shared stories about the intimate family gathering, while presumably knowing I had been excluded. The physical evidence was overwhelming, but my mind struggled to process the magnitude of the deception. This wasn't a miscommunication or an oversight. It required coordinated, deliberate action by dozens of people over an extended period. Patricia, I interrupted her ongoing commentary about the flower arrangements. Did everyone know the date had changed except me? My aunt paused, confusion crossing her features. Well, I thought you knew, but couldn't make it. The new invitations went out months ago. New invitations. Invitations I had never received. Can I see the invitation? I asked. Patricia fumbled in her desk drawer before holding up an elegant cream-colored card with gold foil lettering. The date clearly read Saturday, June 8th, not the June 15th that had been in every communication I received. My parents and brother had maintained the charade of the later date exclusively with me while informing everyone else of the change. The realization hit me with physical force. This was not an error or miscommunication. This was intentional, coordinated exclusion executed with frightening precision. I thanked Patricia weakly before disconnecting, then sat motionless in my half-packed apartment, surrounded by the unworn bridesmaid dress I'd purchased, the wrapped wedding gift, and printed directions to a ceremony that had already happened without me. After ending the call with Patricia, I sat frozen for nearly an hour before summoning the courage to call my parents. My hands shook so badly, I had to redial twice. When my mother answered with a casual, "Hello, sweetie," as if nothing were amiss, something fractured inside me. "Mom," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "I just spoke with Aunt Patricia. The wedding was last week." A pause then. "Oh, goodness, didn't we tell you?" The date changed last minute because of a scheduling conflict with the venue. Her tone carried the slight impatience she typically used when explaining something obvious. "Last minute," I repeated incredulously. Patricia said new invitations went out months ago. I never received one. My mother sighed dramatically. "We definitely told you, Savannah. Remember when we called in March about the venue issue? I'm certain we mentioned it then." That call had indeed happened, but the date change was never discussed. I had meticulous notes from every wedding-related conversation, a professional habit that now served as evidence of their deception. "Mom, I have our text messages from literally yesterday where you mentioned looking forward to seeing me at the wedding this weekend. Why would you say that if it already happened?" Another pause. "Well, you must have misunderstood. Your father, tell Savannah about the date change we discussed." My father's voice came on the line, gruff and dismissive. "We definitely told you it moved to the 8th. Maybe you weren't paying attention, as usual." The familiar accusation that my focus was somehow deficient when it came to family matters stung with practiced precision. "Dad, I took time off work for the 15th. I have a plane ticket for tomorrow. I've been texting everyone about the wedding this week, and no one, not one person, mentioned it already happened." My father's response chilled me. "Don't make this about you, Savannah. It was Mason's special day, and he was disappointed you chose not to come." The audacity of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech. They were not only denying their deception but actively recasting me as the villain who had deliberately skipped the wedding. When I finally collected myself, I asked to speak to Mason. Minutes later, my brother's voice came through, artificially bright. "Hey, Save, what's up?" As if we were having a normal conversation. As if he hadn't just gotten married without his only sister present. "Mason," I said quietly, "why wasn't I at your wedding?" His laugh sounded forced. "What are you talking about? We told you the date changed to the 8th. Everyone knew." The coordinated nature of their lies became increasingly apparent as I pressed for details. When asked exactly when they had informed me, each family member gave different answers. Mom insisted it was during a March phone call. Dad claimed they had sent an email in April. Mason swore he had texted me the new date in May. When I pointed out the contradictions in their stories, they smoothly shifted tactics. Perhaps they had collectively forgotten to tell me, but surely that was an understandable oversight amid wedding stress. The conversation took an even more disturbing turn when I asked about the dozens of interactions we'd had in the past week, all centered around a wedding supposedly happening on June 15th. You probably just got confused, my mother suggested sympathetically. You've always mixed up dates. Remember that time in high school when you missed Grandma's birthday? This reference to a minor scheduling error from 15 years ago exemplified their strategy, excavating ancient history to establish a pattern that didn't exist. When I mentioned the non-refundable plane ticket and hotel reservation, my father snorted dismissively. Always so concerned about money. It's just a couple $100, Savannah. The ticket had cost over $800 and the hotel another $400. Significant sums they casually dismissed while knowing I had incurred these expenses for an event they ensured I would miss. My growing anger must have been evident because Mason suddenly adopted a conciliatory tone. Look, we're really sorry if there was a miscommunication. We'll make it up to you. You can come visit next month and we'll have a special dinner. The offer was insulting, equating a special dinner with their daughter and sister's exclusion from a once-in-a-lifetime family event. I hung up and immediately called my cousin Taylor, hoping for a different perspective. Instead, Taylor uncomfortably confirmed that everyone had received new invitations months ago and had been told I couldn't make it due to work commitments. When I pressed about our text exchange just days ago discussing the upcoming wedding, Taylor became flustered. I thought we were just talking generally about the wedding. I didn't realize you didn't know. One by one, I contacted relatives and family friends who all told variations of the same story. They had been explicitly informed by my parents or Mason that I was unable to attend due to pressing work obligations. Some expressed having found it odd that I would miss my only brother's wedding but hadn't felt it was their place to question my supposed decision. My colleague Diane called during this painful investigation, concerned when I didn't show up for our morning meeting. Through tears, I explained the situation. Unlike my family, her outrage was immediate and validating. Savannah, that's not a misunderstanding, that's calculated emotional abuse. Her words crystallized what I had been struggling to name. This wasn't a mishap or oversight. It was a deliberate, coordinated effort to exclude me from a significant family milestone while maintaining plausible deniability. In a desperate attempt to find evidence of the notification my family insisted had occurred, I scoured my email archives, text messages, voicemails, and even postal mail. Nothing. No invitation with the updated date, no email mentioning the change, no text from Mason with the new information. Nothing but continued references to the June 15th date I had been planning around for months. The final piece of evidence came from an unlikely source, Amber's sister Jessie, whom I had met only twice during video planning calls. She responded to my carefully worded inquiry with shocking candor. I always thought it was weird they changed the date, but didn't tell you. Amber and I had a huge fight about it. I told her it was messed up to exclude you, but Mason convinced her you'd understand since you're not really close anyway. Not really close. The phrase echoed painfully. I had spent months helping plan their wedding, contributed ideas they had implemented, and offered genuine support despite years of feeling secondary in my family. The deliberate nature of the exclusion was now undeniable, confirmed by an outsider who had witnessed the decision-making process. I sat in my apartment surrounded by wedding preparations that would never be used, confronting the devastating reality that my family had not only excluded me from a significant event, but had orchestrated an elaborate deception to ensure I wouldn't discover the truth until it was too late. The realization was physically nauseating. I barely made it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of my stomach. Curled on the cold tile floor afterward, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what had been true all along. The people who should have loved me most had methodically, intentionally hurt me in a way that could never be accidentally explained away. The week following my discovery passed in a blur of grief and revelation. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done without legitimate illness, and spent days alternating between crushing despair and clarifying anger. My apartment became both sanctuary and prison as I avoided human contact beyond necessary conversations with my boss and brief updates to Zoe, who offered to fly to Boston immediately. I declined her offer but accepted her virtual support through daily video calls where she listened without judgment as I processed the magnitude of the betrayal. Sleep eluded me completely for the first 72 hours, my mind endlessly replaying incidents throughout my life that suddenly appeared in a new, disturbing light. The forgotten birthday party invitations in 3rd grade that arrived the day after the celebration. The college graduation dinner reservation mysteriously changed without my knowledge, resulting in my arrival at an empty restaurant while my family dined across town. The Christmas when everyone received personalized gifts while I received a generic gift card with the wrong name written on the envelope. Each incident I had previously attributed to carelessness now revealed itself as a deliberate pattern of exclusion. On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower, change clothes, and begin a methodical investigation of my family communications. With the cold precision I typically applied to architectural projects, I created a timeline of every interaction regarding Mason's wedding, cataloging emails, texts, and phone calls with timestamps and content notes. The evidence was damning. Consistent references to the June 15th date in every communication with me, contrasted with social media posts from family members clearly showing awareness of the June 8th date weeks in advance. No notification of the change had ever been sent to me through any medium. I found an email from 3 months prior where I had specifically referenced looking forward to the June 15th ceremony, which had received replies from both my mother and Mason without any correction of the date. Text messages from my father just days before the actual wedding discussed what he planned to wear next weekend. Not one family member had slipped or revealed the truth, demonstrating a coordinated effort that must have required constant vigilance and communication among them. Even more disturbing was the discovery of a group chat excluding only me, where relatives had discussed wedding logistics explicitly mentioning the June 8th date. My cousin Alexis had accidentally sent me a screenshot meant for this group months ago, which I had archived without much thought at the time. Reviewing it now revealed a message from my mother reminding everyone not to mention the date change to Savannah. The premeditation was staggering. On day 5, I finally contacted my therapist, Dr. Winters, for an emergency session. I had begun therapy 6 months earlier for what I had vaguely described as family issues, but had never delved into the specifics, still protecting my family's image. Now I shared everything: the wedding exclusion, the gaslighting aftermath, and the mounting evidence of lifelong emotional neglect. Dr. Winters listened attentively before naming what I had experienced. Savannah, what are describing is a textbook case of family scapegoating and emotional abuse. The level of coordination required to maintain this deception indicates this isn't impulsive behavior, but a deeply ingrained dynamic. Her validation cracked something open inside me. We spent 2 hours dissecting patterns I had normalized since childhood, how I had been assigned the role of family scapegoat, consistently blamed for conflicts I didn't create, expected to give financially and emotionally without reciprocation, and systematically excluded from positive family experiences while being required to support everyone else's milestones. Dr. Winters explained how common it was for scapegoated children to become high achievers, unconsciously trying to earn the love withheld from them, while simultaneously being punished for those very achievements if they overshadowed the designated golden child. My academic and professional success had become both my defense mechanism and the target for my family's resentment. The wedding exclusion, she explained gently, represents an escalation of existing patterns, likely triggered by your increasing independence and success. By maintaining the fiction of the wrong date, they ensured you would miss the event without having to explicitly uninvite you, allowing them to maintain their self-image as loving family members while telling others you chose not to attend. That night, I cried for hours, not just for the wedding I had missed, but for the loving family I had never actually had. The grief felt bottomless, mourning both the specific loss and the lifelong absence of unconditional love I had continuously tried to earn. By the second week, grief began transforming into clarity. I remembered contributing $15,000 toward wedding expenses, money Mason and my parents had eagerly accepted despite planning my exclusion. I found emails where I had offered design consultations for the venue, detailed suggestions Mason and Amber had incorporated without credit, and evidence of my genuine emotional investment in an event I would never witness. The financial exploitation added another dimension to the betrayal. My friend Zoe finally said what I had been avoiding. They used you for your money and expertise, then discarded you when it came time to celebrate. The harsh assessment resonated with undeniable truth. I began reviewing other financial contributions I had made to family causes over the years, helping fund my parents' anniversary vacation, contributing to Mason's car down payment, regularly sending gifts and money for holidays while receiving token acknowledgments in return. The pattern of financial exploitation paralleled the emotional dynamics. I gave generously, received minimally, and was expected to continue without complaint. 3 weeks after the discovery, I received a text from my mother asking when I planned to get over this misunderstanding because they missed hearing from me. The casual dismissal of my pain became the catalyst for a decision that had been forming subconsciously. After consulting with Dr. Winters, I crafted a calm, direct email to my parents and Mason explaining that I needed space to process their actions and would be taking a break from communication for an undefined period. I didn't blame or accuse. I simply stated facts about the wedding date deception and my need for distance. Their responses arrived predictably. My mother expressed wounded confusion about why I was still dwelling on an honest mistake. My father accused me of being overly sensitive as usual, and Mason sent a single line. I thought you'd be bigger than this. Not one acknowledged the harm they had caused or offered a genuine apology. Their reactions confirmed Dr. Winters' assessment that acknowledging their behavior would threaten the family narrative they had constructed, where I was perpetually at fault and they were always reasonable. The space from constant contact allowed me to recognize how much energy I had devoted to seeking their approval, managing their emotions, and trying to earn a place in their inner circle, a place that had been systematically denied regardless of my efforts. For the first time, I considered the possibility of defining family on my terms rather than continuing to seek inclusion in a system designed to exclude me. After 4 weeks of limited contact, I had established a fragile new normal. Returning to work provided welcome structure, and weekly sessions with Dr. Winters helped process layers of family dynamics previously invisible to me. I began reconnecting with friends I had neglected while prioritizing family relationships, discovering support networks I hadn't fully appreciated. My boss had been unexpectedly understanding, even offering me a challenging new commercial project that provided healthy distraction. The acute pain had evolved into a dull background ache, present but no longer debilitating. Then came the call that shattered my tentative peace. My phone lit up with my father's name one Tuesday evening as I reviewed design plans. I nearly declined but decided answering might demonstrate my emotional progress. Savannah, my father began without preamble, we need to discuss the home renovation financing. The contractor is waiting on the first payment, and your mother wants to start before the fall weather arrives. No greeting, no inquiry about my well-being, no acknowledgement of our recent conflict, just an immediate financial demand. I remained silent, processing the audacity of this approach, which prompted my father to continue with growing impatience. We've selected the materials you suggested in your initial design, but the contractor needs 30% down to secure the schedule. We were thinking you could transfer the money by Friday. The casual presumption that I would still contribute after their betrayal momentarily stunned me. Before I could respond, my father added, "Your mother wants to know if you can come down next weekend to review the plans in person. She's thinking about changing the kitchen layout." The entire conversation proceeded as if the wedding deception had never occurred, as if I hadn't explicitly requested space, as if our relationship remained unchanged. When I finally found my voice, I asked simply, "Dad, did you call to check how I'm doing after what happened with the wedding?" His dismissive snort carried through the line with perfect clarity. "Savannah, are you still upset about that miscommunication? It was weeks ago. Family doesn't hold grudges." The selective amnesia was breathtaking. My family certainly held grudges about perceived slights from years earlier, but my exclusion from my only brother's wedding apparently didn't warrant remembrance beyond a month. I maintained composure, while explaining I needed to review my finances before committing to the renovation contribution. My father's tone immediately chilled. "We've already scheduled the contractor based on your commitment. Mason helped us pick finishes yesterday since you've been unreachable." The implied criticism was familiar. Regardless of circumstances, I was always positioned as the unreliable, difficult family member. The conversation ended with my promise to think about it and my father's barely concealed irritation. Minutes later, my mother called with a sweeter approach, reminiscing about childhood memories in the house and emphasizing how meaningful the renovation would be for all of us as a family. When gentle manipulation failed to secure an immediate financial commitment, she added with calculated casualness, "Mason and Amber might live with us while their house sells. Wouldn't it be nice to have the renovation finished before they move in?" The strategic mention of Mason, positioning his needs against mine, represented another familiar dynamic. My brother called next, his approach more direct. "Look, Mom and Dad already put down a deposit using some of the wedding money, expecting your contribution to cover the rest. They'll lose that deposit if you back out now." The revelation that they had diverted funds I had contributed for the wedding to start the renovation added another layer of financial exploitation. When I pointed this out, Mason scoffed, "It's all family money anyway. What's the difference?" The difference, of course, was consent and transparency, qualities consistently absent in our family's financial interactions. The calls continued throughout the evening, my mother again with thinly veiled guilt tactics, my father with increasingly direct demands, even Aunt Patricia recruited to check if you're feeling better about everything, while coincidentally mentioning the renovation excitement. Their coordinated pressure campaign mirrored the wedding deception in its organization and single-minded focus. Not one call included a genuine apology or acknowledgement of harm. Instead, each conversation contained subtle reminders of my perpetual family role, the difficult daughter whose feelings created inconvenient obstacles to family plans. The following morning brought emails from my parents with contractor quotes, material selections, and a formal request for $45,000, significantly higher than the $30,000 initially discussed months earlier. The budget increase came without explanation or consultation, simply an expectation of compliance. My mother's message ended with a casually devastating line. "We need to move forward with or without your input, sweetie, but it would be so much easier with your help." The implicit threat was clear. My participation was financially desired, but emotionally optional. That evening, Mason called again while I was having dinner with a colleague. I excused myself to take the call, expecting more renovation pressure. Instead, his voice carried unusual tension. "Savannah, I need you to stop making things difficult for Mom and Dad. They've been really stressed about your reaction to the wedding situation." The statement perfectly encapsulated our family dynamic. My reaction to their hurtful behavior, rather than the behavior itself, was positioned as the problem requiring resolution. When I remained silent, Mason continued, "Look, you've always been sensitive about feeling left out, even when no one was actually excluding you. We all walk on eggshells trying not to trigger your insecurities." The gaslighting attempt was so transparent, it almost seemed desperate. "Mason," I responded carefully, "you got married without telling me the correct date. That's not an insecurity I imagined." His frustrated sigh conveyed volumes. "It was a miscommunication that you're choosing to interpret in the worst possible way. Anyway, that's water under the bridge. The important thing now is the renovation." The swift pivot from dismissing my feelings to refocusing on financial demands crystallized something I had been struggling to accept. In my family's eyes, my primary value was utilitarian rather than relational. This realization brought unexpected clarity. While Mason continued detailing renovation plans, I experienced a profound internal shift, the recognition that no explanation, evidence, or emotional appeal would ever penetrate the family narrative where I was perpetually wrong and they were perpetually justified. The understanding was simultaneously devastating and liberating. When Mason finally paused for breath, I spoke with newfound calmness. I'll need to see a complete budget breakdown and timeline before making any decisions about the renovation. My practical response temporarily satisfied him, though his parting comment, "Try not to overthink things like you always do," demonstrated how deeply ingrained the dismissal of my perspective remained in our interactions. That night, reviewing years of financial contributions to family causes, I recognized a pattern of emotional taxation, each dollar representing an unconscious attempt to purchase the acceptance consistently withheld from me. The renovation request wasn't just about money. It represented a critical decision point about my future role in the family system. Would I continue financing relationships that provided minimal emotional return, or establish boundaries that honored my worth beyond utility? The question lingered as I drafted budget questions for my parents, professional and detached, while privately scheduling a flight to Atlanta. Some conversations needed to happen in person, with clear eyes and firm boundaries. I spent the week before my Atlanta trip preparing meticulously with Dr. Winters. We role-played potential family responses to boundary setting, developed grounding techniques for managing emotional manipulation, and established clear parameters for the conversation. "Remember," she emphasized during our final session, "you're not responsible for their reactions to your boundaries. Their discomfort with your limits doesn't make those limits unreasonable." I arrived in Atlanta on a humid Friday afternoon, having informed my parents I was coming to discuss the renovation in person. Their excited response, focusing exclusively on showing me material samples rather than repairing our relationship, confirmed they expected our usual dynamic to continue unchanged. I checked into a hotel rather than staying at their house, a small act of independence that already felt significant. When I pulled into their driveway Saturday morning, my chest tightened with familiar anxiety. The colonial-style house where I'd grown up appeared exactly as it had during my Christmas visit, the chipping white paint and sagging porch steps representing years of deferred maintenance they now expected me to finance. My mother opened the door with an enthusiastic greeting that avoided any mention of recent conflicts. "Savannah." Perfect timing. The contractor just dropped off new tile samples for the master bathroom. No hug, no acknowledgement of my flight, just immediate focus on renovation details. My father emerged from his study with a folder of documents. "We've prepared a complete breakdown of costs like you requested. The bottom line is at the back. We'll need the first installment by Wednesday to lock in the contractor." The business-like approach to what should have been a reconciliation visit perfectly illustrated our dysfunctional dynamic. Mason and Amber arrived 30 minutes later, carrying architectural magazines and chatting about fixtures, as if we were simply continuing a pleasant ongoing project rather than addressing a significant breach of trust. My mother suggested lunch before getting into all the boring budget details, her transparent attempt to delay the potentially difficult conversation I had come to have. Over carefully prepared sandwiches, my favorite type in what appeared to be a calculated touch, the conversation remained superficially pleasant, focusing on neighborhood gossip and Amber's new teaching position. When my father finally steered discussion toward the renovation timeline, I placed my water glass down deliberately and spoke the words I had rehearsed. "Before we discuss financial commitments, I need to address what happened with the wedding." The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze while my father's expression hardened. Mason and Amber exchanged quick glances that confirmed their awareness of the tension. "Savannah," my mother began with forced lightness, "we've moved past that little miscommunication, haven't we?" "No need to dwell on. It wasn't a miscommunication," I interrupted quietly, removing my phone from my pocket. "I've compiled every email, text message, and documented phone call about the wedding from the past 6 months. There was never any notification about a date change. In fact, there are dozens of explicit references to the June 15th date from all of you, continuing right up until the week of the actual ceremony." The evidence-based approach momentarily stunned them. They had expected emotional accusations they could dismiss as overreaction, not documented proof of their deception. My father recovered first, his tone shifting to authoritarian dismissal. "This is ridiculous. We're not going to sit here while you present some kind of legal case against your family." His attempt to reframe my reasonable request for accountability as an attack illustrated the strategy they had always employed: positioning my desire for fair treatment as unreasonable and aggressive. "I'm not presenting a case," I responded calmly. "I'm establishing facts before making a financial decision. You've asked me to contribute $45,000 toward renovating a home where I was made to feel unwelcome throughout my childhood, requested by family members who deliberately excluded me from a significant life event while accepting my financial contribution toward it." The blunt assessment landed like a physical blow. My mother's eyes widened while my father's face flushed with anger. Mason stared at his plate, suddenly fascinated by sandwich crumbs. Amber, witnessing our family dynamics directly for perhaps the first time, looked visibly uncomfortable. "That's completely unfair," my mother finally managed, tears appearing on cue. "We've always loved you. We made one mistake with the wedding date." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, my voice remaining steady. Jesse confirmed that the date change was deliberately not communicated to me. The group chat I was excluded from contained explicit instructions not to mention the new date to me. This was a coordinated decision, not an oversight. The mention of external confirmation disrupted their unified front. My mother glanced accusingly at Amber, whose sister had apparently broken ranks. My father shifted strategies, moving from denial to minimization. Even if there was some miscommunication, holding a grudge is childish. Family forgives. The familiar guilt tactic slid off me with surprising ease as I continued. "I've contributed financially to this family for years. College funds for Mason's stepchildren, medical bills when dad needed surgery, mom's catering business startup. I've given my professional expertise for free whenever asked. I've consistently shown up emotionally and financially while being treated as an afterthought." That dynamic ends today. The silence that followed held a different quality, less shocked, more calculating, as they assessed how this new version of me might impact their plans. My father, ever practical about financial matters, attempted redirection. "Whatever issues we need to work through can happen over time. The contractor needs an answer by next week." His transparent prioritization of the renovation over relationship repair validated my decision. "I've made my decision about the financing," I stated clearly. "I won't be contributing to the renovation." The reaction was immediate. My mother's gasp, my father's darkening expression, Mason's sudden attention. "You committed to this project," my father said, voice dangerously quiet. "We've made arrangements based on your commitment." Just like I committed to attending a wedding on June 15th and made arrangements accordingly, I replied evenly. Commitments in this family appear to be flexible. The parallel landed precisely as intended. My mother switched tactics instantly, moving from wounded innocence to urgent concern. "But what about your connection to your childhood home? Don't you want to preserve those memories?" The irony of appealing to sentimental attachment after systematically undermining my place in the family was apparently lost on her. "I've decided to direct my architectural expertise and financial resources elsewhere," I explained, describing my recent commitment to design a community center renovation in Boston. "It's a project that aligns with my values and allows me to contribute to people who demonstrate reciprocal respect." Mason finally entered the conversation, anger breaking through his careful neutrality. "So, you're punishing the entire family because your feelings got hurt? That's incredibly selfish, Savannah." His accusation, positioning my boundary as punishment rather than protection, might have devastated me months earlier. Now, it simply confirmed the accuracy of my decision. "I'm not punishing anyone," I clarified. "I'm allocating my resources according to how I'm valued. I would welcome a relationship with all of you based on mutual respect rather than utility, but that would require accountability for past behavior and changed patterns moving forward." I outlined specific conditions for continued relationship, acknowledgement of the wedding deception without deflection or minimization, recognition of long-standing patterns of exclusion, and commitment to transparent communication moving forward. My father's dismissive snort made his position clear before he even spoke. "So, we have to submit to some kind of formal probation to remain in your life? This isn't how family works, Savannah." His rejection of basic relational standards as unreasonable perfectly illustrated why those standards were necessary. "That's how healthy relationships work," I corrected gently. If those terms feel like probation rather than basic respect, that highlights exactly why I'm establishing boundaries. The conversation deteriorated predictably from there, my mother cycling through tears, guilt-inducing references to health concerns, and finally cold anger, my father moving from authoritarian demands to dismissive insults about my fancy Boston therapy theories, Mason escalating to accusations about family disloyalty that revealed more about his values than mine. Throughout their emotional display, I remained centered in a way that clearly unsettled them. They had expected either compliance or emotional breakdown, not composed boundary enforcement. When my father finally declared, "If you can't support this family financially after everything we've done for you, maybe you should reconsider whether you want to be part of this family at all," I recognized the ultimatum for what it was, a final attempt at control through the threat of rejection. My response came from a place of unexpected clarity. I've always wanted to be part of this family. The question is whether this family wants to include me as a person worthy of respect rather than as a financial resource. I gathered my belongings calmly, leaving the untouched renovation plans on the table alongside the boundary conditions I had printed. At the door, I turned back to see 4 stunned faces processing the realization that their familiar control tactics had failed. "I'm staying at the West Side Hotel until Monday morning if anyone wants to discuss moving forward differently. I love you all and hope we can build something healthier." Walking to my rental car, I experienced neither triumph nor devastation, just the quiet certainty of having honored my worth after decades of allowing it to be diminished. 6 months after that pivotal Atlanta confrontation, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. None of my family members had visited me at the hotel that weekend, though my mother had sent a text suggesting I was being dramatic and would come around eventually. Their confidence that I would revert to established patterns revealed how fundamentally they misunderstood the shift that had occurred. The early weeks of enforced boundaries had been challenging. The lifetime habit of seeking their approval didn't disappear overnight, and each ignored call or unanswered message triggered waves of programmed guilt. Dr. Winters helped navigate these reactions, normalizing the grief process while affirming the necessity of the boundaries I'd established. "You're mourning the family you deserve to have," she explained during a particularly difficult session, while creating space for relationships that honor your worth. Those relationships began developing in unexpected places. My colleague Diane, who had witnessed my breakdown after the wedding discovery, invited me to her family's monthly dinner gatherings. Initially attending out of politeness, I found myself embraced by her sprawling, noisy clan who demonstrated what family could be: supportive, respectful of differences, genuinely interested in each other's lives. My neighbor Malcolm, a retired English professor, became an unlikely friend after helping carry groceries during a Boston snowstorm. Our weekly coffee conversations about architecture, literature, and philosophy filled an intellectual connection I'd never experienced within my biological family. The community center renovation project I'd mentioned to my parents became a central focus, connecting me with local activists and residents who appreciated both my professional expertise and personal investment in their neighborhood. Working with people who expressed genuine gratitude rather than entitled expectation reminded me that contribution could be joyful rather than extractive. My professional life flourished amid these personal changes. Freed from the constant emotional drainage of dysfunctional family dynamics, I found renewed creative energy for my architectural work. My Boston firm recognized this shift, promoting me to senior design lead and featuring my community center project in their portfolio materials. The financial resources previously directed toward family emergencies accumulated steadily, allowing me to purchase a small but charming brownstone apartment I had previously only dreamed of affording. Occasional communications from my family arrived, testing whether my boundaries remained intact. My father sent renovation updates with passive-aggressive notes about how they had managed without burdening you. My mother's birthday card included guilt-inducing comments about families that stick together no matter what. Mason sent holiday photos of his stepchildren with pointed remarks about what you're missing by choosing to stay away. Each message revealed their unchanged perspective. My boundaries represented selfish abandonment rather than necessary self-protection. 3 months after the confrontation, an unexpected message arrived from Amber. Unlike my family's communications, hers acknowledged reality. I witnessed what happened at that lunch, and while I'm loyal to Mason, I can't pretend what they did with the wedding was okay. If you're ever ready to talk, I'd like to understand your perspective better. The olive branch, while tentative, represented the first recognition from anyone connected to my family that my experience had validity. Our subsequent coffee conversation during her Boston business trip opened a small channel of honest communication. Mason was raised to expect certain things, she admitted carefully. He doesn't always see how his family's dynamics affect others. While not exactly an apology, her acknowledgement represented progress. Through her, I occasionally received less filtered family updates. My parents had completed a scaled-down renovation. Mason had received a promotion. Family gatherings continued with my absence explained away through increasingly elaborate excuses. The knowledge brought a dull ache, but no longer the devastating pain of fresh exclusion. My most significant relationship development came unexpectedly through an architectural charity event where I met Ryan, an environmental engineer working on sustainable building solutions. Our professional collaboration evolved into friendship and eventually into a relationship built on mutual respect and transparent communication. When I finally shared my family history with him, his response was validating without being pitying. They missed out on knowing an extraordinary person. That's their loss, not a reflection of your worth. His healthy family relationships, complicated and imperfect but fundamentally loving, provided a model of what was possible when people valued connection above control. During our first holiday season together, his mother called specifically to check if I had dietary preferences for Christmas dinner, a small consideration that brought unexpected tears because it represented the attentiveness my own family had never shown. My therapeutic journey continued throughout this period of external change. With Dr. Winter's guidance, I explored how early family dynamics had shaped my self-perception, relationship patterns, and professional choices. I recognized how achievement had become both shield and currency in my attempt to earn unattainable approval. Most painfully, I confronted how I had internalized my family's narrative that my needs were excessive, my emotions inconvenient, and my boundaries unreasonable. Unlearning these beliefs proved more challenging than establishing external boundaries, requiring constant vigilance against the critical internal voice that spoke in my parents' tones. The wedding exclusion, while traumatic, had ultimately served as the catalyst for necessary change. Sometimes, Dr. Winters observed, we need a shock significant enough to disrupt our established patterns. Your family's actions around the wedding created irrefutable evidence that couldn't be rationalized away. 5 months after our confrontation, my mother reached out with a first communication that didn't include manipulation tactics. Her brief email acknowledged that things happened with the wedding that hurt you, not quite an admission of deliberate exclusion, but closer to reality than previous messages. She expressed interest in finding a way forward, though without specifics about what that might entail. After consultation with Dr. Winters, I responded thoughtfully, reiterating my conditions for healthy relationship while expressing willingness to start small if those conditions were respected. Our subsequent phone conversation contained moments of genuine connection amidst familiar defensive patterns, a mixture suggesting potential for change alongside deeply entrenched dynamics. My father and Mason remained distant, occasionally sending holiday messages or forwarding family photos, always carefully avoiding acknowledgement of the wedding situation or my subsequent boundaries. Their communications arrived like artifacts from a parallel reality where my exclusion had never occurred or had been definitively established as my fault. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining the boundaries that now protected my well-being. 6 months to the day after the Atlanta confrontation, I received an unexpected package from Aunt Patricia. It contained a flash drive of wedding photos she had collected from various family members, along with a note. I should have questioned why you weren't there. I'm sorry. The simple acknowledgement provided surprising healing, not because it changed what had happened, but because it confirmed my experience had been real rather than imagined or exaggerated. The photos showed events I would never witness firsthand, but viewing them from the emotional safety of my new life allowed me to process the exclusion without being re-traumatized by it. The experience crystallized an essential truth. Healing didn't require my family to acknowledge their behavior. It required me to acknowledge my worth regardless of their recognition. That understanding transformed my approach to these complicated relationships. I no longer needed them to validate my reality in order to trust it. I could engage with them on terms that protected my well-being while remaining open to whatever authentic connection might be possible within those boundaries. I could love them without needing them to be different, while simultaneously insisting on being treated with basic respect. 1 year after discovering the wedding deception, I find myself in a life reconstructed according to my own values rather than reaction to family patterns. The pain hasn't disappeared entirely. Grief for the loving family I never had emerges occasionally in unexpected moments. But alongside that grief exists profound gratitude for the authentic connections now filling my life, the professional work aligning with my values, and most importantly, the internal peace that comes from living truthfully. For those watching who recognize your own family dynamics in my story, please know that breaking generational patterns takes tremendous courage, but creates space for healing beyond what you might currently imagine possible. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone by modeling healthier relationship standards. Have you experienced family exclusion or had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your story in the comments below. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you, but by the authenticity and courage with which you honor yourself and others. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more conversations about family dynamics, healing, and personal growth. Thank you for witnessing my journey from exclusion to wholeness. May it illuminate possibilities on your own path toward authentic connection.